I want to tell you a story about betrayal, silence, and the one night that changed everything. For 25 years, my own son wanted nothing to do with me. He erased me from his life like I'd never existed. I wasn't invited to his wedding. I never got to hold his children when they were born. Birthdays, graduations, family gatherings, I was a ghost. To him, I might as well have been dead. But then, something unexpected happened. I built a new life. I became wealthy, richer than I had ever imagined. And suddenly, the son who hadn't spoken my name in decades picked up the phone and invited me to Christmas dinner. I should have felt joy. I should have felt relief that maybe, just maybe, he wanted me back in his life. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. And what I told him that night shocked everyone at the table. Before I get to that moment, let me introduce myself. My name is Daniel Mercer, though most people just call me Dan. I'm 62 years old, with more gray in my beard than black, and the kind of face that looks like it's carried both laughter and grief in equal measure. I wasn't always the man I am today. Back when my son was young, I was struggling, drowning in responsibilities after my wife passed away. I worked long hours, buried myself in whatever job I could find, and I made mistakes. Mistakes that cost me the only relationship that truly mattered. My son's name is Ethan Mercer. He's 38 now, sharp-minded and ambitious, but hardened in ways that break a father's heart. Ethan was only 13 when he turned to me with eyes full of anger and said words I'll never forget. "You were never there for Mom." You don't get to pretend now I remember the sting of those words like it was yesterday. I tried to explain myself. I tried to tell him I was drowning in grief too, that I loved him more than my own life. "Son, I was doing my best," I whispered back then. My voice cracked. "I know it wasn't enough, but I always loved you." Always, he didn't believe me, or maybe he just couldn't forgive me. Either way, he walked out of my life not long after, and for the next 25 years, silence was all I had. I heard bits and pieces about him through my brother, Harold. Wedding photos I wasn't invited to. The birth of his 2 daughters I only saw through secondhand stories. I'd look at those photos from a distance, my heart aching, my hands trembling, wondering if Ethan ever showed them a picture of me, or if he told them their grandfather didn't exist. For years, I scraped by. I lived modestly, paycheck to paycheck, always carrying that heavy emptiness. And then life twisted in a way I never saw coming. An investment I'd made in a small construction business, something I nearly forgot about, suddenly exploded into success. Within a few years, I went from struggling to pay rent to sitting in boardrooms, managing wealth I'd never dreamed of. It was ironic. When I had nothing, my son wanted nothing to do with me. But now that I had everything, suddenly he reached out. The day I saw his name light up my phone, I froze. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. I hadn't heard his voice in 25 years. My heart pounded like a drum as I answered. "Dad," he said, and that one word nearly brought me to my knees. I had dreamed of hearing him call me that again. But something in his tone, something cold, calculated, reminded me this wasn't the reunion I had prayed for. "Dad, we're hosting Christmas dinner this year. Clara and I thought, maybe you'd like to come." Clara, his wife, I'd never met her, never seen her face in person, though I knew she was strong-willed and protective of Ethan. For a moment I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. After all those years, all the silence, all the pain, suddenly an invitation? I managed to stammer out, "Christmas? After all this time, you really want me there?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yeah, the kids should meet their grandfather. It's time." But even as he spoke, I could feel it, the weight of unspoken motives. He'd never called before. Why now? Why, at this moment in my life? And that's when it hit me. The timing wasn't a coincidence. He knew about my wealth, about the success that had finally come my way. I agreed to go, But in that moment, I made a decision too. If Ethan wanted me at his table, then he was going to hear the truth. He was going to hear the words I had been holding inside for a quarter of a century. And on that Christmas night, when the lights glowed and the room fell silent, I told him something that stunned every single person sitting there. My name is Daniel Mercer, but most people just call me Dan. I live alone in a quiet little house on the edge of town. The place isn't grand. It's simple, with a wraparound porch and a rocking chair that creaks when the wind blows. The kind of house that feels lived in, filled with the ghosts of memories I both cherish and regret. On most mornings, I wake up early. Habit from my younger days. I make a pot of black coffee, sit by the window, and watch the neighborhood slowly come alive. Families rushing, kids waiting for buses, couples jogging with their dogs. And I think about the family I once had, the family that's no longer mine. It's strange how life can take everything from you, piece by piece, until you're left with silence. For me, that silence began the day my wife, Lydia, passed away. She was the heart of our home, the warmth that held everything together. When she got sick, I tried to be strong, but I wasn't enough. I buried myself in work, trying to cover the medical bills, trying to keep food on the table. And in doing so, I neglected the one person who needed me most, my son, Ethan. Ethan was only 13 when Lydia died. 13, the age when a boy needs his father more than ever. But instead of being present, I was absent. Not physically, maybe, but emotionally. I'd leave for work before dawn, come home after dark, collapse into bed, and repeat the cycle. I told myself I was doing it for him, for us. But to Ethan, it must have looked like I didn't care. I can still remember the sound of his voice, sharp with anger. "You weren't there, Dad." She needed you, and you weren't there. How could I explain to a teenager that I was drowning too? That every time I looked at Lydia's empty chair, it felt like my chest was caving in? That I thought, by keeping the lights on, I was doing enough? I failed him. That's the truth. And Ethan never let me forget it. After Lydia's funeral, the distance between us grew wider. He stopped talking to me, stopped looking at me. He poured all his energy into school, into sports, into anything that wasn't me. And when he turned 18, he left. Just walked out with a suitcase, and with it, he took the last piece of my family. For 25 years, that silence became my companion. I worked odd jobs, construction, truck driving, even sweeping floors at a warehouse. Anything to keep moving, anything to keep from thinking too much. I kept a box of Ethan's childhood things in the attic, his baseball glove, his report cards, even the little wooden car we built together when he was 8. I'd go up there sometimes, sit in the dust, and hold those pieces of him, wondering if he ever thought about me at all. My brother, Harold, tried to fill the gap. He'd check in, drag me out for a beer, remind me that I still had a life to live. Harold was blunt, sometimes too blunt, but he was all I had left of family. He'd update me on Ethan, though he knew it hurt. "He's married now," Harold once told me, sliding a photo across the bar. "Her name's Clara, a strong woman. You'd like her if you ever get the chance." I looked at that picture until my eyes burned, wondering why my son couldn't give me that chance. The years blurred together, and just when I thought my story was finished, fate played a trick on me. An old friend I'd once partnered with in a small construction company called me out of the blue. The company had been sold for millions, and as one of the original investors, though I'd long forgotten about my share, I was suddenly handed a fortune. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. Money had never been part of my life before. I bought the house I live in now. I helped Harold pay off his debts. I donated to the local community center where Lydia used to volunteer. And slowly, I began to rebuild myself, piece by piece. But no matter how much money I had, no matter how comfortable my life became, there was still a hole where my son used to be. Nights were the hardest. I'd sit in that rocking chair, listening to the wind, and wonder if Ethan even remembered my voice. And then came the phone call. I still remember the way his name lit up the screen, my breath catching in my chest. After decades of silence, Ethan was reaching out. For a split second, I let myself believe it was about love, forgiveness, maybe even a fresh start. But deep inside, I felt a flicker of suspicion. Because timing is never an accident. The phone call from Ethan replayed in my head for days. "Dad, we're hosting Christmas dinner this year. Clara and I thought, maybe you'd like to come." His words had been calm, even polite, but there was a stiffness to them like he was reading from a script, and I couldn't shake the question, why now? For 25 years I'd been invisible. For 25 years he hadn't wanted me at birthdays, at his wedding, or even when his daughters were born, and suddenly, now with my new wealth, I was welcome. I wanted to believe it was real. God, I wanted to believe my son finally missed me, that he'd forgiven me. But something in my gut told me it wasn't about love, it was about money. That suspicion grew heavier with every day that passed. I called my brother Harold to tell him. He'd always been my sounding board, even when I didn't want to hear his truth. "He invited you to Christmas?" Harold asked, his voice low and skeptical. "After 25 years? Just like that?" "Yeah," I said. "He wants me to meet the kids." Said it was time Harold let out a long sigh. "Danny, don't kid yourself. You really think he just woke up one day and decided he missed you? He heard about the money. I'd bet my truck on it." I bristled at his words. "What if you're wrong? What if he's reaching out for real this time?" "Then that's a blessing," Harold replied. "But you better guard your heart. Because if I'm right and this is about dollar signs, it's going to hurt worse than the last 25 years combined." I didn't want to hear it, but he wasn't wrong. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing Ethan's voice again and again. That single word, Dad. It sounded like honey and poison all at once. I started imagining the dinner, the table, the lights, meeting Clara for the first time, seeing my granddaughters. Would they know me? Would Ethan have ever mentioned my name? Or would I walk in as a stranger? The fear of rejection gnawed at me. What if I showed up, gift in hand, only to be treated like an outsider? What if the kids looked at me like I was nothing more than a checkbook with legs? Still, I couldn't say no. It had been my dream for decades. To just be in the same room as my son again, to hear him laugh, to see his life, even if from the sidelines. The week before Christmas, I went shopping for gifts. I didn't want to be flashy, didn't want it to look like I was trying to buy their affection. For Clara, I picked a set of handcrafted kitchen knives, knowing from Harold that she loved to cook. For the girls, I chose books, beautifully bound classics, the kind that could last a lifetime. For Ethan, I bought a simple leather journal. On the first page, I wrote a single line. "No matter how much time has passed, I've never stopped being your father." As I wrapped the gifts, my hands shook. It felt like I was preparing for battle, not Christmas. On Christmas Eve, Harold came by before I left. He leaned against the doorway, watching me adjust my tie. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," I admitted, "but if I don't go, I'll regret it until the day I die." He nodded slowly. "Then go. But remember, don't let them bleed you dry. Make sure they see the man you are, not the wallet you carry." I gave him a small smile. "You always know how to make things sound cheerful." He chuckled. "That's what big brothers are for." When I finally got into my truck and started driving toward Ethan's house, my chest tightened with every mile. The roads glistened with fresh snow, houses lit up with twinkling lights. Families inside those homes were together, laughing, sharing traditions. And there I was, heading into a house where I wasn't sure if I'd be welcomed as family or tolerated as a benefactor. As I pulled up to the driveway, I saw children's toys scattered in the yard, a snowman half-built near the porch. The house glowed warm against the winter night, but all I felt was cold. I sat in the truck for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel, my heart hammering in my chest. Then, the front door opened. A little girl ran out onto the porch, her hair bouncing, her cheeks red from the cold. She couldn't have been more than 10. She shouted back into the house, "Daddy, he's here!" My granddaughter. For the first time in decades, I was about to step back into my son's life, and I had no idea if I was walking into reconciliation or betrayal. The moment I stepped out of the truck, the cold air hit me like a wall. Snow crunched beneath my boots, my breath rising in faint clouds. The little girl on the porch, my granddaughter, looked at me with wide, curious eyes. For a second, I froze, my heart lodged in my throat. "Hi there," I said softly, forcing a smile. My voice trembled despite myself. She tilted her head. "Are you Grandpa Dan?" Hearing those words nearly broke me. Grandpa Dan. I hadn't heard anyone call me that in my life. My son had never let me close enough to earn that title. Before I could answer, the front door swung open. There he was, Ethan, my son. Older, broader, his once dark hair flecked with gray. For a moment, time collapsed, and I saw him as the boy I used to toss baseballs to in the yard, the teenager who used to slam his bedroom door when I disappointed him. "Dad," Ethan said flatly, stepping out onto the porch. His voice was calm, controlled, but there was no warmth in it. "Ethan," I replied. My throat felt dry, my palms sweaty. We stood there in silence for a beat too long. Finally, Clara appeared behind him. She was striking, tall, confident, with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She extended her hand. "Mr. Mercer," she said, her tone clipped. "Please," I answered, shaking her hand. "Just Dan." She nodded, then turned to the children. "Girls, this is your grandfather." 2 pairs of eyes looked up at me, one belonging to the girl who had greeted me, the other to a slightly older sister clutching a stuffed animal. The younger one, Abigail, beamed. The older one, Sophie, studied me with caution, like she wasn't sure what to make of me. "Hello," I said gently. It's very nice to finally meet you." Clara ushered us inside, and I was hit with the warmth of the house, the scent of roasted turkey, cinnamon candles, pine needles from the Christmas tree standing tall in the corner. Stockings lined the fireplace, laughter and music faintly playing in the background. It should have felt welcoming, but instead, I felt like an intruder. We settled into the living room. Clara poured wine, Ethan asked the girls to set the table, and I sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching the small bag of wrapped gifts I'd brought. My eyes wandered around the room. Family photos on the mantel, all smiles and milestones, not a single trace of me. It was as if I'd never existed in their history. "So," Ethan said finally, lowering himself into the chair across from me, "it's been a long time." "That's one way to put it," I said, my voice steady, though my hands trembled. 25 years, Ethan." His eyes flickered. "Things were complicated." "They were," I admitted, "but you never gave me the chance to make them right." Clara shifted in her seat, her gaze sharp. "Maybe tonight can be a step toward that." The way she said it made my stomach tighten. Her words sounded rehearsed, almost diplomatic. Like this dinner wasn't about healing, but about negotiation. I forced myself to smile. That's all I want. A chance. But deep inside, I knew this night was more than just a reunion. It was a test, and I had a choice to make, whether to play along with the surface-level niceties or to peel back the layers and confront the truth head-on. Dinner was served, and I watched as everyone took their places around the table. Abigail giggled as she reached for the mashed potatoes. Sophie politely passed the rolls. For a fleeting moment, I let myself soak it in. The sounds of a family meal, something I hadn't had in decades. But then came the questions. "So, Dad," Ethan began, spearing a piece of turkey with his fork. "I heard you've done well for yourself lately," Clara chimed in, her tone sweet but edged with curiosity. "Yes, we've heard you've been quite successful. Funny how life works out, isn't it?" The word stung, subtle but pointed. Not a single question about my health, about my life, about the years we'd lost. Just money. I glanced at Abigail, who was humming softly to herself, oblivious to the tension. My chest ached. This was why I came. Not for the adults, but for these girls, my granddaughters. They deserved to know who I was beyond a wallet or a rumor. I made my decision right then. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to play along like some accessory they could dust off for Christmas. That night I would tell the truth. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in a way that left no doubt about why I was really there. I would remind Ethan that no amount of money could rewrite the past, or buy the love we both lost along the way. The rest of the evening moved toward the moment I knew was coming. The dinner plates cleared, the wine glasses filled, the fireplace crackling as the conversation shifted. And when Ethan finally leaned forward, his voice carefully casual, "Dad, have you thought about, supporting the next generation, helping us secure the future?" I knew the stage was set. This was it, the moment I had been dreading, the moment that would define everything. And I was ready. The dinner plates had been cleared, leaving only the soft glow of candles and the crackle of the fire. The room was warm, almost too warm, and the smell of roasted turkey still lingered in the air. For a moment, there was silence. Just the faint clinking of glasses and the sound of Abigail humming a Christmas tune under her breath. And then Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His eyes locked on mine, steady and deliberate. "Dad," he began, his voice calm, measured. "We've been talking, Clara and I. We think it's time to start planning for the future. You've done well for yourself and, well, the family could really benefit from that security." Clara jumped in smoothly, her tone syrupy but firm. "What Ethan means is it would be wonderful to have your support. College for the girls, investments for the house, maybe even something set aside for retirement. You've been given a second chance at life, Dan. Why not use it to give back to your family?" There it was. The mask had slipped. I'd felt it coming, but hearing the words spoken out loud still cut deep. I set my wine glass down carefully, the stem trembling just slightly in my hand. My heart pounded in my chest, but my face remained calm. I had been waiting for this moment. I took a breath, my voice steady as I spoke. "Ethan, Clara, let me make something clear. I didn't come here tonight to write checks. I came here because I wanted to see if my son was still in there. The boy I raised, the boy I loved, the boy I lost 25 years ago." Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Clara's smile tightened. "You think this is about money?" Ethan shot back. His tone was defensive, sharp. "You disappear for decades, and now you're accusing us, accusing me, of using you?" I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. "No, son. I didn't disappear. You cut me out. You turned your back when I needed you just as much as you needed me. I tried to reach out, birthdays, holidays, letters. You ignored them all. You made me invisible. And now, suddenly, when I have something to offer, I'm back in the picture? Tell me, Ethan, if I was still the broke, worn-out man I used to be, would I be sitting here tonight?" The room fell silent. Clara opened her mouth, then closed it again. Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with something between anger and shame. Before he could answer, Abigail's small voice broke the tension. "Daddy, why are you yelling?" she asked softly, clutching her stuffed animal. Ethan froze, his shoulders slumping slightly. I turned to Abigail, my expression softening. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "I'm not yelling. I'm just telling the truth. Sometimes the truth is hard for grown-ups to say out loud." She tilted her head. "Are you really my grandpa?" The question pierced my heart. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to smile. "Yes," I said, "I'm your grandpa. And even if your daddy never forgives me, I want you to know something. I'll always be here for you. If you ever need me, if you ever feel alone, you can count on me." She smiled, innocent and unburdened, and in that smile I saw the possibility of something new, a bond untainted by years of bitterness. Clara looked away, her lips pressed thin. Ethan's face hardened, but I caught the flicker of something else in his eyes, hurt, maybe even regret. I stood then, slowly, deliberately, raising my glass. My voice carried through the room. For 25 years I've lived with silence. Tonight, I didn't come here to buy my way back into this family. I came here to remind you that I am more than the mistakes I made, more than the wealth I now have. I am a father. I am a grandfather, and I will not be reduced to a wallet. The words hung heavy in the air. The fire popped, the clock on the wall ticked, but no one spoke. Finally, Ethan pushed back his chair. His face was pale, his eyes glossy, though he quickly blinked it away. I need some air," he muttered, walking out of the room. Clara followed him, whispering under her breath. I stood there, unsure if I'd just destroyed any chance of reconciliation, or if I'd finally cracked through the wall Ethan had built around himself. Abigail tugged at my sleeve, her small hand warm against mine. "Grandpa Dan," she whispered, "will you come back next Christmas?" Tears pricked my eyes. I knelt down, pulling her into a hug. "If they'll have me," I whispered back, "I'd love nothing more." And in that moment, surrounded by silence and the flicker of Christmas lights, I knew the truth. I had spoken from my heart. Whether Ethan ever accepted it or not, I had finally reclaimed my voice. When Ethan walked out of the dining room that night, the sound of the door shutting behind him echoed through the house. Clara followed quickly, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, leaving me standing in the quiet glow of the Christmas tree. The room felt hollow, the air heavy with all the words we'd exchanged. For a moment, I thought I'd ruined everything, that my honesty had slammed the door shut for good. But then, I looked down and saw Abigail and Sophie still at the table. Abigail was clutching her stuffed bear, her eyes wide and curious, while Sophie watched me with that guarded expression teenagers wear when they're old enough to understand tension, but too young to carry it. "Are you okay, Grandpa?" Abigail asked softly. That single word, Grandpa, warmed me more than the fire crackling in the hearth. I forced a smile and nodded. "I'm fine, sweetheart." Sometimes grown-ups just have to work through old hurts. Sophie leaned forward. "Dad's always been tough. He doesn't like to talk about feelings." Her honesty caught me off guard. I saw a glimpse of Ethan in her, the same sharpness, the same need to put up walls. And in that moment I realized something important. History had a way of repeating itself if nobody broke the cycle. I didn't want my granddaughters to grow up thinking love was measured in money, or that silence was the way you dealt with pain. So I stayed. I stayed with the girls while Ethan and Clara were outside, their muffled voices carrying through the frosted windows. I told them stories, funny ones, about their dad when he was their age. How he'd once hit a baseball through the neighbor's window and blamed it on the dog. How he used to sneak cookies from the jar and swear his mom must have counted wrong. For the first time in decades, I laughed telling stories about my son, and the girls laughed too. When Ethan finally returned, his expression was hard to read. He didn't sit back down, but he didn't ask me to leave either. He just lingered near the doorway, watching quietly as his daughters giggled at a story about him falling off his bike. For the rest of the evening, we didn't revisit the argument. We opened presents. Abigail squealed when she unwrapped her book set, hugging it to her chest. Sophie smiled politely, running her hand across the embossed leather. Clara thanked me for the knives, though her voice was still tight. Ethan opened the journal last, his eyes flicking to the note I'd written on the first page. He closed it quickly, said nothing, and placed it carefully beside his plate. When the night finally wound down, I stood in the doorway, coat in hand. Abigail ran up and hugged me around the waist. "Come back soon, Grandpa Dan," she whispered. "I will," I promised, and I meant it. Sophie gave me a shy nod, the kind that carried more weight than words. Clara offered a polite but strained farewell. And Ethan, he didn't say much, just drive safe. But it was the first time in 25 years he'd told me to take care of myself. A small step, but a step nonetheless. When I drove home that night, the roads slick with snow. My heart was heavy, but strangely light at the same time. I didn't have reconciliation, not yet, maybe not ever. But I had faced the truth. I had told my son exactly what I had carried in my chest for decades. And I had found something even more precious, my granddaughters. 2 little girls who saw me not as a wallet, not as a failure, but simply as Grandpa. As I pulled into my driveway, the house dark and quiet, I sat in the truck for a long time, staring at the reflection of Christmas lights in the snow. I thought about Lydia. I thought about the life we should have had, the family we could have built if I had been stronger, more present. I thought about the years I lost with Ethan, years I would never get back. And then I thought about the future, because maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to build something new. Not with Ethan, not yet, but with Abigail and Sophie, with the next generation. I realized then that wealth is a strange thing. It can open doors, but it can't heal wounds. It can buy presents, but it can't buy presence. What mattered most wasn't the money in my bank account. It was the honesty I had spoken, and the promise I had made to those little girls. That night, I sat in my rocking chair by the window, the same place I had sat for years in silence. But this time, I didn't feel alone. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope. And I knew the lesson I had to share, not just with my family, but with anyone who would listen. Wealth can buy comfort, but it can't buy forgiveness. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give isn't money, it's the truth. And sometimes the people who need to hear it most aren't the ones you expect. So that was my story. A story about silence, loss, wealth, and the search for forgiveness. I don't know if my son and I will ever truly mend what's been broken, but I do know this. Honesty gave me peace, and love found its way back to me through my granddaughters. If this story touched you or made you think about your own family, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your perspective down in the comments. I read every single one. And if you found yourself connected to this journey, please give this video a like. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Because sometimes the stories we tell aren't just about us. They're about reminding each other that forgiveness, love, and truth are worth holding on to.